right, well, might as well go ahead and get started. My name is Josh Rank. I'm the content marketing specialist here at AutoRABIT. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be discussing some common problems associated with Salesforce DevSecOps processes. If you have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A section below, and we'll take some time at the end to go through those. First, we're going to hear from Tim. He's the Success Architect Director at Salesforce, followed by Steven, Premium Support Engineer at CodeScan. And we'll also hear from Naresh, the technical lead at AutoRABIT. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Tim to begin the discussion. And Tim, I think you're still on mute.
Are you seeing my screen in preview?
We are seeing your camera right now.
Well, let's try it again. There we go.
There you go.
Sharing? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited today to talk about DevSecOps with everyone. I'm going to start kind of high level, and we'll drill into, kind of the meat of the presentation with a couple of the other guys. But first, I want to just introduce myself really quick here. My name is Tim Perdue. I've been at Salesforce for about 6 years, but I came via a customer. So I felt a lot of pain and suffering along the way. So it's great to meet everyone. I don't think I'll make any forward-looking statements, but they force us to have this in the deck. Don't buy based on what I say. Actually, I might make a couple forward-looking statements. So what I'm going to talk about, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to do it as sort of David Letterman style, do a top 10 list. And this discussion could be, it could be DevSecOps in general, not necessarily Salesforce, although that's the filter as I've talked to customers and kind of heard what they've said. And there's quite a few misconceptions that we want to talk to. So let's get into these and see how it goes. All right, number 10. They're not in particular order. Number 10. I hear this a lot. Oh, DevOps, developer experience, it's for developers, and that couldn't be more wrong. When you see tools like AutoRABIT, CodeScan, and some of the other tools, it's clearly for a much broader audience. And when you think of DevSecOps, it's truly developers, operations, and sort of security kind of sits in the middle. So if you look at the pipeline of sort of moving code into production, it starts with code, ends with operate. Security is wrapped around the whole thing. So really, that's the idea of DevSecOps. It's about people. It's a people part of technology, as people part of the big three there. But it is so important because without that part, everything's going to fail. So it is not just for developers. Let us start with that. Number 9, we should be able to do our DevSecOps initiative by the end of the year. And that is never, ever going to happen. You might be able to run on bots or implement a tool or implement a feature in a year, but you're not going to do that with DevSecOps. It's absolutely a journey. And the way we measure that journey is through this maturity model, right? We actually have a service that we provide that actually plots where customers are in their life cycle. And just to give you a sense of kind of real world, we've done about 80 of these sort of DevOps decks, and I'll use DevOps, DevSecOps interchangeably here today. We've done about 80 of these, and most of them are sitting at about a 2. So to get to a 5 is kind of not that practical. This is a journey that could go on forever. If you think about us here at Salesforce, we've been at this since around the time when, kind of DX started, maybe 2017. We're still at it. We're still working on it with our Salesforce orgs. So this is really a journey and not something you're going to get up and, finish and celebrate, right? And that's, I think, what makes it really, really interesting. Okay, number 8. Come on now, number 8. There we go. Well, we don't have any money for DevSecOps, and I'll challenge that because you are spending money whether you want to think of it that way or not. If you look at this this chart, this came from this thing ROI of DevSec transformation. It's part of the kind of the Google Cloud stuff, and this I'll share this presentation with you guys so you can kind of click on this. But if you look at even the minimal, even if maybe you don't have 250, maybe you're a small IT shop, there's definitely an ROI to making some type of investment. You are investing people's time today, and it may be quite inefficient. Okay, I've had customers. I had a customer at the beginning of the year. They were spending 3 days pushing code out 3 days, most of the time on the weekends. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing. Not only were the developers miserable, but it was a very expensive thing to do. Plus, that's not really often enough. And so you can just look at some other metrics, but the rework is so much of an ROI. You reduce it with DevSecOps, and you can maybe reallocate some of that money to some tooling and stuff you'll need to actually do this right. Okay. Oh, work.com. I don't know if you guys heard of work.com. We rolled it out in about 3 weeks at the beginning of the pandemic. And the guys on the DevSecOps team, we would have never been able to do it if we hadn't had it sort of as part of that process. That's what allowed us to iterate. And we were iterating twice a week at the beginning, and then it became weekly, monthly, and then we started into the normal 3 cycle a year. And work.com still exists, but that was just an interesting time. Really showed the power of DevSecOps for Salesforce. Okay. Number 7, we can do DevSecOps with our existing skills. And I would say, yeah, you can, as long as you hired guys from AutoRABIT or CodeScan, right? Because these are different skills. And I'm being a little funny about it, but there are definitely some personas you need to start looking at, right? Even if you look at just a release manager, you got this release manager, the normal thing that they would do is compliance reporting, retrospectives, things that are part of my sort of an agile development framework. And so it's really important to educate and kind of grow your skills. And this is a great place. DevSecOps is a great place to develop your skills, because we're really kind of at the beginning. This is going to continue to evolve. And you can see Salesforce doing tooling. Companies like AutoRABIT and CodeScan are enhancing their products and services. This is here to stay, and it's the new way of deploying Salesforce and really any code. So this is just something to keep in mind. I would definitely invest in education and training. Okay. Number 6, can we just buy the tooling? And yes, you can. You can buy a great tool. AutoRABIT, our customers love AutoRABIT. A lot of my federal customers use CodeScan, and they absolutely love these products. But when you think of the capabilities of a full DevSecOps program, you're thinking of these capabilities here. And I'll give you the slides so you can kind of see some of them. But there's a lot of things on here that have nothing to do with the tooling, right? You see things like strategy, you see things like process. These are all made up of these capabilities of DevSecOps domain. And so tooling is critical, and you're going to definitely need tooling, but there are other things to consider. So you can buy part of it, but part of it's going to be cultural and sort of the people part of people, technology and process. All right. Well, we learned DevSecOps from this webinar. We're good. And I don't think you are. I just did a quick word cloud here. There's a lot of things to learn about DevSecOps, which is why it's so fun. And I would really encourage you, and I have some resources at the end of this deck that I'll share with you. This is a great place to invest some of your new skill, as you skill up in it, and some new training. Talk to your leadership. This is only going to help you in your career, and it's going to help your current company. Okay, so education, knowledge, all that's going to be key. All right. Number 4, IT and the business are culturally on the same page. I hear this, but this is probably true for a very small percentage of customers. Okay. And if you look at this survey, so I have this survey I pulled from Atlassian, did a 2020 DevOps survey. In fact, 85% of the respondents reported that lack of skills, infrastructure, and adjusting to the corporate culture are key complaints when implementing DevSecOps. There's really this cultural aspect of it that you really need to consider. And so I'm going to blow this up a little bit. I love this chart because to me, when I think about something like DevSecOps, right? I think about it like this. I always picture the tree and the roots, this concept, right? And we didn't invent this. This has been around. But if you look at above the tree, above the ground, the obvious things, right? The strategies, the tooling, right? The structures, process, people, who does what, all that's up there. But really the intangible cultural factors are kind of below in the roots, right? You got unwritten rules, you have values, you have behaviors, how things are done, right? Those are absolutely as critical as the above ground processes. So when you're thinking about really anything, think about this tree, right? That there are 2 sides to it, and to do it right, you really need to tackle both. Okay. All right, let's see, where are we at? Number 3. Well, let's go big or go home. Okay, we want to do DevOps. We want to put everything in DevOps. And we want to build out our pipeline. We're going to load it all up, and we're going to put Salesforce in it. Probably not the best way to do it. In fact, when we started in 2017, Salesforce, we actually started with a very small project, and we continue to kind of work on and maturing our processes. It's all about iteration. Okay, we started very small. Progressive improvement is definitely the name of the game. Here. Okay, so you really want to start small because there's a lot to be learned. I was working with a customer who, it was so important to the customer, and they had about 40 more than 40 orgs, right? They could have really started with sort of a big bang approach, but what they did instead is they took one of their newer orgs, a very clean org, and they said, we're going to develop the blueprint for DevSecOps within this first very clean org. And that's what they've done. And now they have applied these blueprints to the other orgs in their environment. Even if you're a single org, you don't have to think about it necessarily as org based, but it could be project based. Find that next project coming up, somewhat simple, and maybe that's a chance to prove out your process with DevSecOps. So don't go big, or I think these guys here might be going home because they tried to go big. So I guess I'm not a funny guy, so we'll keep going. All right, metrics. Let's talk about metrics. We can do that later. How often have you heard this with any IT project, right? Oh, we'll worry about the reporting later. And in fact, the metrics are the keys to the kingdom here, right? Peter Drucker said, if you can't measure it, you can't fix it, you can't improve it, right? That quote always resonates with me. But if you're having trouble getting started, I mean, these are really 4 metrics that you can absolutely start with. Now, within AutoRABIT, there's other dashboards and tooling and all kinds of really good stuff. So you can check that out within AutoRABIT. And some of the other tooling available. But these are the 4, I would say these are the DORA 4, and DORA stands for the DevOps Research and Assessment. It's sort of a kind of an entity, but they really look at 4 things. Deployment frequency, which is easy, right? I met with that customer, right? They were deploying monthly, 3 days. That's not great. Now the elite would be on demand, deploying multiple times a day. You're going to just work that continuum, just work to the left a little bit, right? Maybe you start thinking about more of a weekly thing. How can you do that? Right? Because that's going to provide so much value back to your business, right? Looking at lead time for changes. This would be, I've checked in what I think is a sort of a completed project. How long does it take for that project to make it out into the hands of the business? Okay, that's lead time for changes. When something happens and you need to kind of restore a service, how long does that take, right? And then what's your failure rate? You can see that the kind of the worst in class, almost half of the code going out there needs to be fixed. And you really want that. The world class would be, up to 15%, right? Even seems like a lot. But these are 4 metrics to get started. Don't think about it later. Absolutely think about the metrics while you're thinking about your DevSecOps strategy. Okay. And the number 1 thing, security, Salesforce handles that. We don't have to worry about it. No, I would worry about it. Salesforce gives you a platform, but I have seen customer after customer kind of, expose themselves to things. And that's why things like CodeScan are critical. Because if you look at the way a lot of my customers use CodeScan, they actually are constantly at the source of typing in code. They're checking the rules in CodeScan to make sure they don't have any vulnerabilities, right? There's a lot of rules within CodeScan or with PMD, some of these other technologies that are around vulnerabilities. So if you don't start with them and you check them at the beginning, you're set. And the other thing, CodeScan, as you deploy your code to maybe an integration sandbox, you're running your scans, right? So these issues never really make it into the production environment. And our host here, Josh, did a really great post. I guess it's an article out on AutoRABIT, and I have a link to it here, where I think it's a really simple read, but it talks about some things when it comes to DevOps security vulnerabilities, right? And so you should definitely check out that article. I read it, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's definitely a place to get started. Okay, so those are the top 10 things I hear about. And, I researched it a little. I asked some of my colleagues who are experts in DevOps, and these are pretty common things. So hey, get started with that. Think about those 10 things. And I am going to turn it over to Naresh, and he's going to dive a little deeper down into the technology. So we'll see you at the end for some Q&A.
Thanks, Tim. That was a great presentation on DevSecOps. Let me share my screen. I hope you can be able to see it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So before we dive into DevSecOps and understand why it is needed, Tim has already covered that DevOps, as we all know, is a set of processes and tools that enable us to be more agile across the development lifecycle of a product. While we are keeping up with the pace to cater our customer needs with an unprecedented velocity, we often take security for granted, which may ultimately lead to a catastrophic situation, like in the case of Code Cow or SolarWinds, in which case the actors could barge in and steal the sensitive data of their customers. It signifies why security should be considered as an essential element across the life cycle of an application, making it an integral part of our processes and tools, introducing the concept of DevSecOps. Salesforce, we all know, is a powerful platform that integrates with multiple other tools and platforms to help enable its customers to be able to accomplish more by doing less. There will be less code that we'll be writing. It is most of the times we'll be dragging and dropping things, and we'll be integrating with multiple other tools, or we'll be installing managed packages which are coming from different sources altogether. But with great power comes great responsibility as well, which is inevitable for Salesforce as well, like any other platform. Salesforce enables security to a great extent through profiles, permission sets, and sharing rules. But the platform has limited control over the processes and tools the organization employ. So, for example, if I use GitHub or some other tools which are external to Salesforce, the Salesforce platform has limited control over them, and there are still chances that some of the vulnerabilities could still get introduced inside the platform and make our data vulnerable to attacks. With that being said, we would like to dive deep into how this can be achieved. Today, we'll be talking about why keeping track of our changes by versioning them can help recover from a mishap and to backtrack. The role of code quality in keeping the application secure. Stephen will be walking us through some of the interesting aspects around how maintaining code quality and monitoring will help. And we'll be talking about the impact of being non-compliant with regulatory compliances and how to avoid being in such a situation. And finally, we'll be talking about the different ways in which data or metadata could be corrupted in Salesforce or compromised, and how backing up and checking if we are capable to restore back the data and metadata can help recover from an unforeseen incident. Finally, we'll be presenting the ultimate suite of products that we have at AutoRABIT, which helps to enable DevSecOps for you. So starting off with how to keep track of your changes, Salesforce makes it seamless for admins and developers to make changes anywhere in production or test logs, which could potentially be wiped out in subsequent deployments. So for example, if I make some change inside my Salesforce production org, let's say I made some changes to my IP ranges, or let's say I made some changes to my Apex code or stuff like that, and directly in the production, Salesforce does allow that. In any of the subsequent deployments, if I override those changes, that will lead to a catastrophic situation. But how we can mitigate that is by maintaining the changes being done anywhere in the across the code pipeline to be versioned in a version control system like GitHub or some other tooling which will help us to track these changes, and it could also potentially be able to work as a single source of truth, which will help us enable to keep track of all these changes happening and to avoid any overrides happening across the environments. In the world of Salesforce, it's not just the code, but also the metadata and configuration and settings that should be prevented from any accidental overrides. And every change at both metadata and data level should be tracked. Having a system in place that enables us to handle overrides and resolve conflicts related to metadata along with code is vital. Salesforce metadata doesn't have a standard structure like in case of other platforms like Java, which makes it difficult to resolve conflicts with traditional toolset, which is not specifically designed for Salesforce with capabilities to understand the XML structure in which Salesforce provides us the metadata and everything. So some of the considerations that we have to keep in mind are like we have to employ a version control system that is configured to track the changes across and help enable auditing as well. And we should also have and when it comes to compliance and security, it is a matter of ensuring that you are making the right changes. So it is vital to have version control enabled for auditing all the changes that are going through our systems. And continuous monitoring has to be enabled on the entire supply chain, right from design to delivery, making sure that the system is not opening up for any new vulnerability. And finally, quality gates at each and every level of development lifecycle helps monitor each and every change and prevents any bad code from configuration from going beyond the developer's hands. Being able to configure all these systems in place requires a lot of synergy between multiple teams within the organization and also requires a lot of effort in bringing up a consensus between all of them. But it is required for the success of an organization altogether, which requires some pain and effort to be put in by all the teams across. Stephen, would you like to help us walk through and understand how code quality can help secure our application?
Yes, hi, thank you, Naresh. I'm Stephen. I work with the CodeScan tool. We are a static code analysis platform. So we deal in kind of the end of that process of helping ensure your code quality to increase maintainability throughout the entire DevOps lifecycle. What you really want to get to is a point where your process is adulterated or grown enough that you can ensure that you're not promoting bad code and have a level of quality enforced. And by quality, I mean standards for best practices, of course, bugs and security. But most importantly, maybe this ability for a new programmer to come into your organization and read your code and parse that and be able to hit the ground running and start contributing and creating things for you within a few months. And really what drives that is having a high quality code base that is easy to maintain. So of course, we've all ran into issues before. If you've ever had to take down a system in production, you'll know that that's very costly and stressful. So the goal of implementing static code analysis into your DevOps process is to catch those issues in the design and the development stage when they're not as expensive, or maybe even the testing stage. Really just anything to prevent you from having to deal with production issues. Now, Tim mentioned a great thing about needing people, processes, and technologies. You really do need a complete organizational buy-in for this to work. If you don't have the people that are trained, and you don't have people that understand the DevOps process, and if you don't have organizational buy-in to allow this process to happen and to work on process improvement, you're going to have issues, and buying the tooling or the technologies isn't going to assist you much. And on that same end, if you've got the people and processes in place and you're really ready to do this, To move forward, you need to look at tooling options because they can save you a lot of options, and you want to avoid having a if it's not built here, it doesn't work kind of mentality. So once you've got that buy-in and you're ready to look into tooling, you're good to go. But what I've noticed is that there is a reluctance to spend on process optimization, and that's due to kind of letting success get in the way of optimization, sort of that people don't want to let better be the enemy of good enough. And what the fallacy is there is that you're already paying, like Tim said, you're already paying for this in your process, and these improvements are going to give you great cost benefits. But as a developer, I've personally experienced very successful businesses be quite reluctant to commit to the time to improving their DevOps process because what they have is already working what they consider well enough. So the benefits of your good code, like I mentioned, you're going to have less data loss and corruption. You're going to have less unwanted changes. You won't have those regressions. If you have you maintain a high quality code base and standardize that through analysis, you're not going to have to worry about implementing security flaws or things like that. Next slide, please. So what static code analysis tools do, they essentially give us increased insights into our code base. They're going to let us get visibility into our issues, categorize those and organize them so we can attack that technical debt in an organized manner and get the biggest problems out of the way first. And overall, once you've got your pipeline matured, we're going to increase the velocity of your releases with these analyzers because they optimize a lot of tasks that would normally be human read. For example, the peer review or the code review process, if you've ever had to do either side, a lot of times their anxieties revolving around not knowing what to expect. If you're the junior, you might not know if your code is up to snuff. And if you're the senior, you might have questions around what kind of issues you're going to have to fix, whether or not you're going to be able to fix them and or amply explain why. With a static code analysis, that developer pulls a request or commits a pull request. He looks at a report of just his code and he can see every issue in that your organization cares about and work down that with an itemized list. So going into your code reviews, you have a good idea of exactly what's going wrong and what you need to do to fix it. Next slide, please. So Tim mentioned something I think that I also want to hit on here. It was very good, the go big or go home. When you're looking at tooling, it's important that you get something that you can incrementally implement into your process. You're not going to have a mature DevOps process overnight. That's something you need to start small with and develop over time, and you'll need to see what fits for you. And eventually you'll get to that CI/CD step. But in the beginning, I recommend a flexible tool that can implement in different parts of your process. For example, with static code analysis, we'd like to start with an individual scan. Maybe you just get a scan so you get an idea of where you're standing and you can see what your code looks like. After that, you might want to develop a branch management strategy where your developers or pull requests are getting scanned on demand so that we can do those peer reviews that I mentioned. After that's done, you might want to shift all the way left and get your developers IDE plugins or linters so that they can see the results of their code and their rule violations in real time. And that way you can prevent them from ever committing those errors. And then finally, maybe once you've got all of that done and you're ready, you implement a CI/CD with your builds breaking based on a quality gate so that you can automate that process and prevent any bad code from ever being promoted. But these are all steps that you can do one at a time. And when you're looking at tooling options, you want to look at tools that give you the option to kind of grow with you. So with DevSecOps, there's kind of a holy trinity here on this slide. You'll notice there are a few things. First, of course, we're going to help you reduce that technical debt by pointing out your errors. But the other three things we're really concerned about in DevOps is automation and speed. And in that manner, we're going to help automate your code analysis. We're going to help automate those reviews. We're also going to help automate the breaking of your builds based on quality gates. Reportability is very important in the DevSecOps space. Like you said, if you can't report on it, if you can't measure it, how do you fix it? So code analysis is going to give you dashboards, reports, and high-level analysis so you can get a very easily digestible health check of your code, essentially. And then finally, security. Security is the name of the game right now, and it, like he said, Salesforce does help us in some ways, but it is by no means a golden shield against attacks. So you want to be able to get those scans in, preferably at the developer level before they ever get implemented. But again, implementing into that CI/CD process, you can automate and ensure that you're not ever going to implement certain types of vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. Finally, this is just a quick overview. This is what a generic best case scenario of your pipeline would look like if you were going to implement a static code analysis. We would have step one here is a target branch. We prefer this branch to be the source of truth and what I would like to call the earliest point in which all of your code exists before production. So often this is a dev or a QA or a staging branch. And what we'll do is we'll do an initial scan of this branch to get you a standing point so you can understand what your current refactoring effort is. From there, we'll set up a quality gate based on your new code to enforce a standard saying, yes, we've identified there's a refactoring effort, but from this point forward, we're going to have this set standard and everything must meet this grading criteria. From there, we can automate pull requests. So whenever your developer finishes a feature in his sandbox or on his branch, he can take a pull request to your target branch and get a result of his code before it's merged. And in that way, we run our scan, you pass the quality gate, and you can ensure that you're never actually promoting anything except for what you consider to be highly acceptable code. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So coming to regulatory compliance, Salesforce serves multiple industries like healthcare, finance, banking, verticals, which could potentially hold sensitive data of their users. And it being a global platform also provides the flexibility for its customers to be compliant with the standards such as GDPR, CCPA, and also industry standards like HIPAA and PCI and stuff like that. Being aware of these standards and configuring the application in right way is vital for the organizations to be compliant. And also it is very much needed for the organizations to configure it in the right way and make sure that none of the changes that they are making are actually breaking breaking them from being compliant with these rules. Chances are one small mistake can make the entire application to be non-compliant with the required standards and make it susceptible to expose the user's data, resulting in attracting huge fines, which could potentially be able to wipe out the entire businesses as well in certain cases. Right tooling and configuration could be employed to prevent any data loss and help mitigate risk of making data exposed for unauthorized access as well. So some techniques like masking and encrypting help secure data and prevents it from being corrupted or theft. But apart from that, we need to also have continuous monitoring tools in place to make sure that whatever changes that we are doing for any of these is not actually impacting the vulnerability of the data from getting exposed to unintended participants. And for the next few slides, we'll be talking about how to avoid the data loss and the common sources of how data corruption or loss may happen. So the sources of data loss or corruption could be anything, but most common areas to consider include avoiding user error, corruption of software or hardware, cyber attacks, and theft due to unauthorized access and stuff like that. But an example of a data loss due to user error is something like an unintended update operation on a field without filtering based on the intended target could actually change the entire data across the table, and it may result in the corruption of the entire data and also also there could be chances of some software corruption or hardware failure, which may also lead to the data from getting corrupted across the tables, or there are chances that the cyber attacks or stealing of the data can bring down our systems in certain cases, which will result in a few days of outage, which may ultimately lead to the business from getting getting impacted in a different way. Having a continuous backup strategy in place that can be leveraged to recover from such scenarios, or at least the data loss with minimal RPO, or the recovery point objective or recovery time objective, enables us to help address such scenarios. Finally, we have the complete DevSecOps platform that helps reduce the mistakes that we are doing with configuring the security, and choosing the right tooling will definitely help us enable the organizations to introduce DevSecOps across their code pipelines, and to make sure that everything is configured to prevent any data loss or any unintended configuration changes or security changes from being made on their Salesforce environments. And when we are choosing the right tooling, it is required that the tool is aware of the problems inside Salesforce, and specifically working on the issues that we have, issues or the processes that involve the knowledge of having of Salesforce metadata structure and Salesforce specific rule set and stuff like that. We have a lot of tools that are focusing on to cater these areas. For example, we have a backup and recovery solution, which is Vault, which helps in backing up and recovering data by which is basically aware of the schema of different Salesforce orgs. It works with different managed packages like Aptos and Encino and stuff like that. And we also have a CI/CD platform, which is capable of understanding the metadata structure and profile conflicts and stuff like that, and helps resolve them across. And it has multiple integrations with respect to test automation, version control systems, and application lifecycle management. Finally, we have the CodeScan tool, which is specifically designed for analyzing the static code inside Salesforce organizations. And it doesn't just go through your Apex code or Visual Force pages or Lightning components. It is also aware of the metadata configurations, and you can build and customize tools on top of the tool to cater your needs with respect to components like profiles, custom objects, and whatnot. Any metadata components can be analyzed through this, and make sure that quality gates are configured across your pipeline to help understand if there is any unintended code from going beyond the developer's hands. And with a continuous delivery cloud, it enables the business agility, more frequent releases and deployments, shorter lead time, higher quality code, dramatic developer productivity gains, operational excellence, change management, and it also leads to faster innovation. Finally, we'll be taking up questions, and I'll passing it on to Josh.
Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much. We have one question from the crowd. Says, does CodeScan also handle staging? I believe, Stephen, this is probably your area.
Right. CodeScan would not handle staging. You'd need an intermediary tool for that step, such as AutoRABIT.
Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Tim, this one might go back in your direction. How do I get started in DevSecOps?
Great question. I have some resources at the end of my deck. There's a trailhead. There's actually a couple of good videos. We actually had a couple of videos from our recent TDX, Trailhead DX. It was just last week. So when we share the deck with everyone on the call, we'll also include a resources page, and there's some ways to get started there. But there's a really good trail, kind of walks you through the process, the easy way to get started. That's what I do.
Okay. Can CodeScan check visual force and lightning components?
Yes, it can. We control, or I'm sorry, I was reading the other questions. We check visual force, Aura, lightning components, metadata, Apex, JavaScript, CSS, the entire Salesforce ecosystem.
And you've been adding stuff to components and stuff. So I've noticed it constantly evolves.
As far as the question about the 10-point slide, this webinar will be posted on the resources section of our website, and we can reach out afterwards and share the slide deck with people. How do you manage integrated change management and version control in a complex multi-org global implementation? Naresh, maybe you could speak to that one.
Yeah, we have instances scattered across the globe. So we have instances scattered across. You can have the tool configure the org based on the geography that it is located and point it to the corresponding version control.
Okay. Do you recommend to include managed packages code during static scan?
Yes, so there's a couple of different ways to go about that. If you're looking at it from a security review standpoint, for example, it's entirely possible to pull down just those managed packages into a pipeline and just scan those bits and pieces.
Okay. Is it also possible we can scan a specific component? If yes, how?